Hello everyone, it's Silvia from Fairlight Tarot. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to do a VR to Marine from the Waves of Your Soul, one deck per arcana. So I watched this video last week and I have to say I immediately wanted to start picking decks to do a VR to this video because I think that it's really interesting. So as Marine has explained, she chose a deck that represents each and every one of the major arcanas. So one deck for the Fool, one deck for the Magician, and so on. But she also specified, and I think that comes the tricky part. Here comes the tricky part. So basically, she specified that it needs to be decks that they don't necessarily have that specific arcana that you like in the deck. So, for example, if I really like the star card in the Slow Tarot, I wouldn't necessarily pick the Slow Tarot to represent the star card unless the whole deck would signify for me that spirit of healing and hope of the star card. And that made it difficult, that made it tricky because I do tend to associate a deck with the spirit of the major arcana if I do like one particular card. I don't know if I explained myself, but in any case, it's gonna be fun. There's gonna be 22 decks, so grab a coffee because it's gonna be a long video. So, of course, we start with the Fool. The Fool is all about starting new. It's all about that sense of innocence and sometimes also that sense of not really knowing when things are going. That really determines the energy of the card. And thinking about all of the decks in my collection, I didn't want to choose this deck, but I kind of had to. And it's remembering the Sweet Fool Tarot. And the reason why I was hesitating to pick this deck is because it does have the name Fool in the title of the deck. And I really asked myself, are you picking this deck simply because there is, the name Fool in the title, or is it because the whole deck really represents that energy? And I don't know, but I got this deck last week and I started working with it. I worked a lot with it, as a matter of fact. And I really do believe that this deck, it just presents that kind of vibes. And so I really enjoy using it. But it's also because it gives me that sense of just going for something and not necessarily knowing what comes next, and knowing that you just have to take the leap. And it is a very kind and compassionate deck. It's a very calming kind of deck, which is sometimes is not necessarily the energy that I associate with the Fool card. I do tend to believe that the Fool card gives you that sense of trepidation of starting something new without necessarily having all the information that you need. But at the same time, this deck really gives you that sense of new beginnings. There is this calmness that sometimes you wish the Fool had, as in it is part of one of the qualities that you need to have when representing a Fool. And it's such an amazing deck. It works really well with many Oracle decks. I've actually been going through 6 or 7 of my Oracle decks to see which one will pair better. And I just really love working with it. So this is my pick for the Fool card. For the Magician, I wanted to pick a deck that gives me a sense of esotericism that other decks don't. And I really had to go with the Tabula Mundi. So now I'm just going to zoom in because I have the really tiny version of this deck, the mini, I believe it's called. There's other versions, so if you're not familiar with this deck and you want a bigger version, you definitely can. About a couple of months ago, or maybe 3 months ago, it was still available on the website of the creators, so I'm assuming it still is. I don't know for certain. But this deck is quite famous. I think there's a lot of people who have this deck, but they don't necessarily use it. And I haven't seen it a lot on Instagram or YouTube or other social media platforms. But I think that it's an amazing deck. Look at the star card. Isn't it such a beautiful card? I love the prevalence of the blue. But because it's such an esoteric deck, it really gives me that idea of the magician. You have all of your resources with you, everything you need. It's basically at your fingertips. You can use it. You can use this deck also for example, for the deck and walk, it's very, very good, which is what I generally do. But I also like to look at the cards, and I also really appreciate the modern take on the thought, because this is obviously thought-based. I like the fact that it's got the titles. These are the hermetic titles as assigned by Aleister Crowley, so not the original ones as per the Golden Dawn, which I generally prefer because they do give me more possibility to elaborate on the meaning of the cards, but I really like this one anyway. So this is the Tabula Mundi, and it's my pick for the Magician. So the pick for the High Priestess, I felt like it had to be a deck that really gave me the possibility to tap in my intuition, because that's what we associate with the energy of the High Priestess. And I had to go with the Major Arcana Tarot by Leonora Carrington. This is a recent reprint by Folger Press. I actually double checked recently, so as per a couple of weeks ago, let's say as per the end of May, this deck was still available in the website at Folger Press, and it's actually available for a very reasonable price. I was so stoked to be able to get this deck because I was almost going to spend $250 to get a copy, which these were the prices this deck was going for when it was still out of print and it hadn't been reprinted yet. I really love the energy of this deck. I use it mostly for one card pool because it is a Major Arcanas only, so obviously you only had 22 cards to it, and it doesn't give you the whole picture, because sometimes obviously we need to refer back to the so below, not just as the as above. But it is so amazing, and I really love the association between the images on the cards and also the color palette that has been used. I just really, really adore this deck. It's one of my favorites. And coincidentally, the High Priestess is, I guess, is probably one of the most known cards of this deck, because it's really, really powerful. Even though it does start from the traditional symbology of the RWS, but then it develops in its own way. And I really appreciate the whole work that has been done by Leonora Carrington when it comes to tarot. She was really into the occult, and you can tell that she knows her deck. So this is my pick for the High Priestess. So the pick for the Empress, I felt like it needed to be a deck that, to me, felt like it was really nurturing, because that's the energy that I associate with the Empress. And so I went with the Oak, Ash, and Thorn deck. So this is one of the reprints. It's not the original from the Kickstarter, by Three Trees Tarot. This is from 2021. I absolutely love this deck. I know that it's very well known, but if you're not familiar with this deck, it's actually on sale as of today, so the middle of June. It's on sale in the website, the original website from the UK. This is really one of those decks that gives me that kind of vibe, the nurturing kind, the peaceful one at the same time, but it's almost as if this deck knows everything that is going on, but at the same time it's there for you, and it's there because it wants to protect you. It wants to be a mother to you. So this is pretty much the same type of energy I associate with Empress. I absolutely love the color palette. I absolutely love all of the images on the cards. It is, as you can see, a very autumn feel kind of deck because of the colors. It also is a nature-based deck, and you will see it plenty of animals. There are no people, which sometimes I actually appreciate. It depends on the kind of reading that you want to do. I do use this deck quite a lot. As a matter of fact, this is my second copy. The first copy, I had it with me when I was traveling a couple of years ago, and unfortunately it got a bit of water damage. And this type of cardstock, even though it's very sturdy, doesn't really do well with water damage. It became all warped. But I was kind of happy because I had a great time with it, and so I did not hesitate when the opportunity came to me to repurchase the deck. It is one of the decks that is very safe in my collection. I really, really like it. As a matter of fact, I also bought the other one with the dragons. It's called Ember, Smoke, Ash, and Ember, sorry. And it's beautiful. Obviously, it's got the same creators and the same illustrators, so it's very similar to this one. Although I have to say that this one gives me a very earthy kind of energy, whereas the one with the dragons is mostly a fiery kind of energy. But this is my pick for the Empress. So the next pick is going to be for the Emperor, and I have to say I wasn't 100% sure about it, but then I was looking at it and I really felt like, for me, this is the right one, and it's the Penelope's Tarot. Now, you'll know this deck under a different name. It's called Valoria Tarot, and it has been printed mass market by Rockpool Publishing. I don't have the Valoria. I do have the original one printed by Sam, with the indie one, basically. I actually do prefer this one, I have to say. It is very similar. All the artwork is the same, and I believe even the backs are the same. But what happens is that Rockpool published it with a different format. I believe it's shorter and probably slightly wider, and it has like larger rounded corners. And I don't, so this is what, it's weird for me. I feel that this deck has got the Emperor energy, the energy of the person who is in charge and is putting back order into the chaos, and it has to do so because it's representing society and the way in which a society is evolving. And so I felt like by changing the format, especially by making it kind of softer, it lost a little bit of that Emperor energy. And so I really do prefer this version. But it's, obviously, if you have this deck in the mass market version, it's absolutely fine. As I said, it's exactly the same artwork. It's just, it's slightly different. It feels slightly different. But that tiny change, that's what really made me feel like it was losing on its main energy. I really like the fact that it's a minimalist style, as other decks by Sam Brook are. So, for example, the Macabre Tarot, the Rainbow Moon, although the Rainbow Moon is not as minimalist as the Macabre and as this one. But it also is in tone with the Emperor, because the Emperor doesn't need a lot of objects. It doesn't need to be busy. The Emperor just is, and it gives that kind of authority, but also that kind of paternal protection that I believe doesn't necessarily need a lot of words around it. And so I really like that it's a minimalist deck as well. Such a beautiful deck. I also love the color palette, by the way. These pastel tones are absolutely gorgeous, and this is my pick for the Emperor. So my pick for the Hierophant, I don't know. I didn't even have to think about it. Immediately I knew which one I wanted to show you, and it's the Osho Zen Tarot. And the reason why I picked this one, by the way, this is my really used copy, as you can see. But the reason why I went with this one is because it really feels like it shares that kind of energy. So the Hierophant, we have, with my members, we've recently done in my Read Like a Pro series, we've actually done a deep dive on the energies of the Hierophant, the clusters that it forms with the other cards in the major arcanas and the constellations that belong to the number 5, basically, so all of the 5 in the minors. And I feel that there's also a really strong learning energy that not necessarily everyone associates with the Hierophant. But my study is based on Mary Kay Greer's books, and so she really explains how in order to be teaching, which is what we normally associate with the hierophant, we also need to be learning first. So we need to understand what the message is, we need to translate it and then relate back. And if you follow my channel, you'll know that this is what I always say when I talk about tarot readers. So tarot readers, we are basically interpreters. So we look at what we listen, we look at the cards, we listen to the message, and then we also take it as if it were our own duty to just relay the message back in such a way that the person we're reading for will understand what we're talking about. So it does have that duality about learning and relaying it back, learning and teaching. And I really believe that this deck shares so much into that kind of vibe. So this is my pick for the Hierophant. So the next card is obviously the Lovers. And again, I felt like I was going for something really odd as a choice that came to my mind. But hear me out. So I've chosen the Bohemian Gothic Tarot. This is by Bybee Studio. I believe this is the 3rd edition. I also have the latest edition. I do prefer this one because it doesn't have any cold stamping. But this is just a personal choice. Now, I know what you will think. How is this showing the energy of the Lovers? Well, I believe that the Lovers always express a sense of choice. They express a sense of duality. There is some kind of movement because it's number 6. So there's always some kind of transition or even transaction related to number 6 in numerology. But it's also because for me, this deck does give you the possibility to move from one state of mind to the other. And it also really encourages you to take a stance, to pick the side that you want to be in. So it does show you, for example, a lot of cards in which there's kind of a cheeky tone to them. And it's almost as if you were smiling but also winking at you at the same time. And at the same time, it also gives you the possibility to take on a more serious kind of position because it is a serious kind of deck. Obviously, because of the images on the card, it goes on the Bohemian Gothic. So obviously, we'll see cards relating to monsters. Well, there you go. But it also tells you that you can look at the cards in a different way. And so you are asked to take a decision, just make up your mind, look at the cards and understand, do you want to read them in a serious way or do you want to read them as if it were telling you that life cannot be taken too seriously? Because there's always something lurking, yes, in the background or in the darkness, but at the same time, we also need to lighten up. And so I thought, the more I thought about it, the more I was convinced that this is my pick for the Lovers card. So my pick for the Chariot is also an interesting one. I feel like this is kind of a theme of the video, that I feel like I have to justify my picks for the cards. But then again, I do have a different way to look at the majors. I do concur with all of the keywords that relate normally to the majors, but I also have my own idea on them. And so for the Chariot, I picked the Tarot Landscape. This is by Francesca Matteoni, and the illustrations are from by Yoshimari. It's a mass market deck, so you can grab a copy if you want. It's very affordable. It's a really beautiful deck, and I have to say that to me, this is the typical deck that gives you Chariot energy because it does give you that sense of movement. It is a really beautiful deck. It's got a fantastic artwork. I really do appreciate it. As a matter of fact, I also follow Yoshimari's Instagram page. And if you do, you will see that most of the art represented is very similar to this. What happens is that when I am looking at these cards and I'm using this deck for any kind of divination practice, I feel like it's taking me on a different level and it's giving me the possibility to really go deep and almost let's say, conquer the card, as in the meaning of the cards, also when it comes to the minor arcanas, because it really gives you an additional layer of interpretation. It is based loosely on the RWS system, but at the same time, by showing you animals in specific situation or landscapes in specific situation, it also gives you that kind of additional step, let's put it this way. I mean, look at this judgment card. It's absolutely fantastic. I really, really love this. And so I really like it. I love pairing it up with the Earth Angels message cards. I believe the title is. It's a deck by Amanda Clark that I showed in a couple of videos ago, where I was talking about decks that I don't necessarily see portrayed anywhere on social media, but they are incredibly beautiful. And those two together, so this one and the Earth Angels, is a really wonderful and powerful combination, let me tell you. But I just really love the energies of this deck, and it's my pick for the Chariot. So my next pick is also kind of elaborate, but okay, for the Strength card. But I am very convinced I'm sticking to my guns here, because it is the Bornstone and Earthflesh Tarot. Let me just zoom out a bit, because it does have a larger box. And by the way, we keep on being taunted by both Avalon Cameron and Anatorian, because in their Instagram accounts, they keep on confirming that yes, it has been picked up mass market. Anna is posting her art and all of the changes that the new deck mass market will have, but they're still not telling us a defined timeline, which I don't think they have yet. And they're also, so far they haven't said which one of the mass market publisher is going to pick it up. So this is my pick for the Strength card, and the reason is because the Strength card is for me all about conquering your doubts. So you start from a disadvantaged position. You understand that you have doubts about what you're going to do, what you represent, what your role is in life, in your life and in others' life as well. And then, as you know, you evolve, you move into a place of certainty, or at least that's the direction you're taking. And it's all about this in this deck. It's all about looking at the cards, not necessarily feeling certain about the meaning of the cards and their relationship with the artwork, which is, by the way, fantastic, as I always say. Anatorian is one of my favorite illustrators ever. But then the more you use it, the more it talks to you, the more it does communicate that sense and that vibe of the card that is represented. And so it really feels like you're doing that kind of process in which you're tackling your doubts and defeating them and going on, and feeling more and more certain and secure on what you're doing. And so this is the deck that I've picked for the Strength card, because it really does represent that kind of process for me. And it's also because I wanted to show you how beautiful these cards are. And you know what? Because I ask myself if I really want to show an out-of-print deck, but knowing that this deck is going to be picked up mass market, I have no problems in showing the cards, because I love it so, so much now. And I know that people will be able to get a copy if they want to. So the next card is obviously the Hermit. And this one was already a sure pick. Like, I did not have to think about it. I immediately went straight forward for this deck. Is the Sister Witch Tarot by Julia Jeffrey. This is a deck that has been published, I think, at the end of last year, or perhaps the beginning of this year, not entirely sure. This is an incredibly beautiful deck, but the reason why I picked it for the Hermit is because it does signify that sense of wonder, but also that sense of wanting to understand, wanting to know something more. By the way, I'm not sure I've been showing the backs. So these are the backs. They're so beautiful. They're not reversible, but they are incredibly beautiful. This is a deck that I have learned how to know a lot better while using it and doing a lot of research on it, because I am part of Lisa Pepe's Unicorn Fam, and one of the perks of the membership is a deck study, and so this was the latest deck study that we've done, and it's mind-blowing how many references there are in these cards, but also in the book, the guidebook that we've seen. It is published by Llewellyn, so of course it does come with a really interesting guidebook or companion book, like many of Llewellyn decks do. But I just absolutely love the way in which I now can relate to the card, because I feel like I've done this work of introspection, and not just by knowing what the meaning or the references of the cards are in general, but also to the references as they feel for me, let's say. So not just the origins of the cards or the artwork, but also the impact that they have on myself. I absolutely love the intensity of some of these cards, and I love the fact that, for example, when I pair it with some oracle decks like the Compendium of Witches Tarot or also some of Brian Froud's decks, I really feel the way in which the cards speak to each other, they relate to each other, and I really, really love using it now. It's by far one of my favorite decks lately. And I wouldn't have thought so, because I have the Tarot of the Hidden Realm, which is also by Julia Jeffrey. And even though I absolutely love that deck, I don't have the same kind of relationship with the deck as I do with this one now. So this is my pick for the Hermit. So my pick for the Wheel of Fortune was also something that I picked up immediately, and is probably one of my top 3 tarot decks of all time, even though it's a very recent deck. And it's the Savvy Soul Tarot. Now, I've shown this deck quite a fair bit lately in my channel because we talked about this. And by the way, I talked about this deck with Benny. We had a really lovely chat on his channel. So if you want to see me, because I know that I don't show my face in these videos, but I did talk with Benny for just over an hour and a half. It was a lovely chat. And so just check it out in Benny's channel, Benny at The Fool's Apprentice. He has some really lovely chats with many tarot tubers, and I love watching those videos because I actually like to know the origin of many of us. How did we get into tarot, and how do we relate to tarot? What our first deck was, also our favorite deck. And I talked about this one. So this is by Julie Whitelish. Unfortunately, it is out of print. It was a Kickstarter campaign, and it has not been reprinted after that. However, if I'm always positive, I always want to believe that if Julie receives enough requests, perhaps one day she will consider reprinting. Now, this is my pick for the Wheel of Fortune. Why? Because I really believe that this deck embodies the sense of what goes around comes around. So there's always the sense of seasonality, but also the continuity and the circle of life. There is so much life in this deck. It's absolutely unbelievable. It is obviously a very modern deck, as you can see from the elements on the cards, and also the way in which it depicts the protagonist of the stories. But it's very spot on when it comes to also, for example, if you look at the core cards, the archetypes are really easy to gather from. So the Queen of Coins, for example, is the Queen Bee. And that's great because it really talks about the being in touch with nature and being the nurturing kind. And so I really love the fact that we have everything that is represented in these cards is part of life, and everything that is part of life is in these cards. And the Wheel of Fortune is that card that really brings you back from the as above to the so below and back to the as above. It's a continuous cycle, and I absolutely love the vibes on it. I also think it's a very well done deck in the sense that it's very inclusive. And I just absolutely love it. There's one gem that not everyone knows. You will notice that the skin on the characters on the cards is always gray, and there's a reason for that. So Julie was explaining that she thinks of gray as a color that expresses a clean slate. And so we are invited to actually give our own colors or paint with our own colors onto the cards. So feel what we feel when we find ourselves in this situation, which I think is absolutely fantastic. So this definitely is my pick for the Wheel of Fortune. So when it comes to the Justice card, there's something I just wanted to say, because I feel like I watched a few videos, and one thing that every tarot reader says at a certain point in their journey is that they don't always know how to read the Justice card, or in some cases, they don't really know how to differentiate between the Justice card and the Judgment card. So there's always a sense of consequences in both justice and judgment. But I refer back to Rachel Pollack because she is my Bible. And basically, Rachel says that the justice card is when the consequences are affecting us in the realm of the living, let's say in this world. And judgment is more like the consequences that are not just in this so below, but also and primarily in the as above. So there is a sense of cosmic justice when it comes to the judgment card. It's also related, obviously, to receiving some news, but it's also related to something that has finally coming back to you in the right way. So it's almost as if we were telling you that you have become, after going through all of the major arcanas, you have finally become the right person at the right time. And I absolutely love that concept. Whereas when it comes to the Justice card, which is what we're going to see now, is the sense of having to face the consequences of something that we've actually done. So karma, for example, comes to mind. And when I think about justice in that way, I cannot stop thinking about the Tarot of Oneness. This is by Robin Voisey. And it's an indie deck. I have acquired this deck recently, I think maybe a month ago or something like that. I don't know why I hesitated so long. In any case, this deck is an indie deck, but it's still available. So if you like it, you can still grab a copy from, I think the creator has an Etsy site, an Etsy shop. So this deck to me is really all about acknowledging that we have our own presence in society, and everything we do has repercussions. And so we need to be taken accountable for the consequences of everything that we do. But I know that it sounds a bit gloomy when said that way, but it actually is referring back to nothing either positive or negative. It's just literally just recognizing the weight that we have in society, and the fact that whenever we move something, whenever we do something to others, but also to ourselves, whenever we show up or we decide not to show up, there are consequences to that. And so I really feel like this deck is telling you all of this. By putting the person in the cards, for example, but in a very first-person singular kind of perspective, it gives you the possibility to see yourself in the environment and in society. And so I actually really appreciate that. And the way in which I relate to the cards is very similar to that. I am present in this card. I am right there. What am I doing? So how do I read the card in a way that relates back to me? This is a great deck for divination and for just reading something about a situation. I use it quite often when I do members-only readings, because I really strongly believe that it does give you a lot of insight in a situation. But this is my pick for the Justice. Another short pick was the one for the Hanged One. Absolutely, I had no hesitation whatsoever. I had to show you the Tarot of the Abyss, also by Anatorian. But this is a mass market deck by US Games. Also available, very affordable. It is a fantastic deck. And the reason why I am picking this deck is because, well, there's actually two reasons. First, because it gives you the possibility to choose between two different cards for the Three of Swords and also the Ten of Swords, which is here somewhere. And if you read numerological, for example, this is the deck for you, because if you look at the Three of Swords, that is all related to the growth in the suit of the mind, that I absolutely love to use it this way. But sometimes I also use it in the traditional way with the traditional symbology of the RWS, because, you know, it depends on the reading, basically. So that's one of the reasons. So the fact that it gives you a different perspective, and I love that, and that is what I relate to the Hanged One, taking on or giving you a different perspective. But it's also because there's so many cards in this deck where you will see very clearly, very clearly, the expressions on the characters, whether they look directly at you or, for example, you see them in such a way that it's very clear what their feelings are. The Hanged One, coincidentally, is fantastic because it gives you the perspective of the world upside down, almost as if you, the reader, are the Hanged One, as you can see here. So I feel that all of these cards have been designed by Anna with that, keeping that in mind, keeping in mind that she was actually giving us the possibility to see things through a different perspective, through a different lens. And because of her dexterity with the I don't know what media she uses, but I do believe that this is probably charcoal. I could be completely wrong. As I say all the time, I'm not an expert on art, but if it is, I believe that she's incredibly talented at expressing feelings through her drawings. And look at this card, for example, the expression on this person's face. So this is the Nine of Pentacles. And it's just, there is this sense of contentment, and it's wonderful, but it's not yet the happiness of the 10. So I really strongly believe that this deck is an excellent deck for beginners, because it really teaches you how to read the feelings of the characters in the cards. It is fantastic when it comes to understanding the meaning behind the cards. Look at this Five of Swords, for example. I just really I don't like what's happening here, of course, because I do love animals and I cannot stand animal cruelty. But at the same time, as a tarot reader, I just appreciate so much the way in which this card is speaking to me and giving me the vibes of the Five of Swords. And so, I don't know, I feel like there's everything to be learned in these cards. And it's not just because, as I said, you know, it gives you the Three of Swords and the alternative Ten of Swords, but it's also because it really invites you to take on a different meaning, take on a different interpretation of the cards. This is the alternative card for the Ten of Swords, for example. And you can really tell that it's the reaching the full cycle in the suit of swords. And so getting at that point of stillness that implies wisdom as well. I absolutely love this deck so much. This is definitely my pick for the Hanged One. So for the Death card, I had a couple of options, but I decided to settle for the Light Seers Tarot. This is the pocket edition, so let me just zoom in. I do also have the full size, but I did a mistake, so I actually edged it in black. But it was one of the very first time in which I was trying to use a different marker rather than a Sharpie, because I didn't feel like the Sharpie was giving me enough enough grip on the card. And so I was using a permanent marker, one of those that, again, I'm not an expert, but they're very wet. I don't know if it makes sense at all. And so it actually bled, all of the black of the marker actually bled into the cards. And I still like it. I kept it because I like it that way. I mean, it was my mistake, but I kind of like it that way. It gives it sense of being used, almost vintage kind of look. But I wanted a clean deck, and so I reached out for the pocket size, and I absolutely love this one. It's an amazing deck. So let me talk about the fact that I chose this one for the death card. Well, you know, for once, and I allow myself to actually talk about the specific card on the deck. So this death card is called Death, and then there's the lemniscate to symbolize infinity. and that is called Rebirth. And this is the only card that is giving you an alternative kind of keyword for the card. And I think it's very significant because it really gives you the idea of being reborn. And that is what I always associate with the death card. That possibility of, starting your life cycle again. Or perhaps you're in the middle of your life cycle, but you take a completely different turn. There's a number of things that Ken said about this card. It's all about transformation. It is one of the cards that I associate the most to the process of alchemy, because alchemy is the science that studies transformation, even though the magician is relating back to the alchemist as the person that transforms things. But death is all about transformation, it's all about rebirth, it's all about starting again, but it's also all about getting rid of what no longer serves you and start again with something that is still there for you, which ties it back to the Tower card, even though the Tower card it's a catastrophic kind of event. And it doesn't necessarily always point to something really still standing, even though if you do have solid foundation, obviously that's the one that will still be with you even after the catastrophic event. Now, I have to say that I love this deck also because there is a lot. I know that many of us, myself included, have been going on and off on this deck in the sense that it was all the rage when it came out. It was one of the very first diverse or kind of diverse decks that was out there. And then right now we're spot with so much choices for really actually diverse deck. Then we look back at this one, it doesn't look as diverse as we thought at the beginning, but I have to say that I still do appreciate that it broke the schemes, and it was almost signifying that death card in the sense that it put an end to something that we were used to seeing cards, so picture perfect people, not much diversity in skin color, in body shape, in age. And, it opened up a new era for tarot deck creators to actually focus on what we people actually look like, and not, the picture perfect ones that we've seen in other decks. So I really do appreciate you for this. And this is my pick for the death card. So my next pick is for the Temperance card, and it had to be the Slow Tarot. I had to find a way to show you the Slow Tarot in this video. I absolutely love this deck. This is one of my favorite decks by Lacey Bryant. It was out of print for such a long time, and then Lacey decided to reprint, so it was available. I don't know whether it's still available. My apologies. I hope it is. I hope everyone can get this deck if they so wish, if they like it, because it's an amazing deck. It does have a modern take on the RWS, but for me, this is the deck of time. And it actually is called the Slow Tarot. So one of the keyword actually on the card, let me find it, it says here, take it slow. I don't know if you can see, take it slow. And I really appreciate that, because that is the what I always associate with the Temperance card. The Temperance card talks about time, but it talks about time in a sense that it sees time as a continuum that is, depicted by the motion of the water from one cup to the other. And by the way, I love something that we talked about with my members the other day. We were looking at the hierophant card and the constellation cards that belong to the hierophant, so all of the fives in the minors. And if you think about it, the two cups, so the five of cups is normally in the RWS shows you a person that is shrouded in sadness because they're focusing on the three cups that are actually spilled. And behind them, there's two cups that are actually still upright, and the liquid is still there, it has not been spilled. Now, there is, America Greer points out there is a parallel between the two cups of the Temperance card and the two cups of the Five of Cups that is still, moving the water in between the two cups. I love those kind of things and that kind of knowledge. So it's actually a really, really cool kind of set of videos that we're doing, because we're really going in a deep dive about each and every card, and it does give us the perspective of a professional reader, let's say. But going back to this deck, it's wonderful. I love the fact that it points to time, and I love the fact that it points to the fact that we can take things slow because time is a continuum. Time doesn't end. And so we can really take our time, but we can also try and understand what our relationship with time is. And that's something that we were actually taught in back in school. I always appreciate because I had a fantastic literature professor in high school. She was absolutely wonderful, and we talked about the concept of time as it has been depicted throughout the centuries in literature. But we also looked into other medias like cinema, for example, photography, etc. And I really strongly believe that time is one of the most human concept that there is out there. Of course, it's independent from human beings. Time, it just is. It's a dimension. But at the same time, it is the one that has the most influence on people. Think about the fact of aging, for example, how we always try to slow down the aging process, how we will pay a lot of money to just look perhaps 1 year younger. And sometimes we just do it without realizing how futile that is because time keeps on going. We cannot stop it, but we can take it slow. And I love the fact that this deck is giving you just that. So this is definitely one of my favorite decks, and it's my pick for the Temperance card. So for my next pick, for the Devil, I had to go with the Tarot of the Holy Spectrum. And again, I'm so sorry, Marine. I know that you said more than once that it wasn't about the card, the Devil card that you like the most. It was about the sense of the deck. But I have to say, every time I think about the Devil, I think about the Devil card in this deck. So I guess I also associate the deck itself in its whole, with the Devil card. This is, well, you will know that the Tarot of Holy Spectrum has got different editions. I have two. I also have the Infinity edition, which is the one with the mirror-like backs. This is the second edition, first printing from 2020, Case for Haze. By the way, I don't know. This is the Dutch pronunciation of the name. I don't know if this person is Dutch. If not, I apologize because I probably butchered the name. But what I wanted to say is that there is so much symbology in this deck. At first glimpse, you wouldn't even probably see it, or at least I didn't see it when I got my first impressions on this deck. But I really believe that there's a lot you can take from this deck and the way in which it shows you the specific cards. I love for example, the hang one is actually called the tether one, and I think it's fantastic. It's brilliant because it really showing you a different way of looking at how the hang one can be read and perceived. But the main reason why I think of this deck whenever I do think of this deck is the Devil card. It's just, I believe it is the best Devil card I have ever seen. It is definitely my favorite. And it's also one of those cards that has, it breaks a little bit off from the main theme of the deck in the sense that you don't see keywords here, you don't see messages. That card has a lot of messages. Let me just get to it because I keep on talking about a card without being able to actually show you, and that is not the most effective way. And of course, when you look for a card, it will probably be at the end of the deck. Of course, it was at the end of the deck. Here it is. So this is the Devil card from the Tarot of the Holy Spectrum. Do you see what I mean? It's got a lot of sentences here, and they're not meant to be keywords, as in it's not giving you the keyword related to the meaning of the card. But it really puts you in a fantastic position in order to understand what the vibe and the energy of the card are. So, for example, I'll be forgotten, fear, you're not enough. Should, self-doubt, why even try? I have to, everyone hates me, I can't. Don't deserve to be heard, fear of change, no one cares, I'm worthless. Honestly, this gives me chills every time I see it. It is and at the same time, let me say something that people will probably find a bit odd, but this card to me works in a very compassionate way. It's just that when I see this card and I read these sentences, there is so much of my inner child that comes to the surface and wants to be heard. And I let it be heard and I let it speak because of this card, or thanks to this card. Because I feel that if someone who's a tarot creator who I never met, I don't even know anything about this person, okay? But they come up with the meaning of the devil card with these sentences. These are so triggering for so many of us, me included, that it feels almost as if it were telling you that you're not alone. It's okay to sometimes feel this voice in your head telling you that you'll be forgotten, that you're not enough, that you don't deserve to be heard, or that you're worthless. It's okay to feel that way because you're not alone. Others have been down the same road. They also refer back to the devil, which is, we know as tarot readers, we know that the devil is there to trick you. The devil is there not to scare you, but to make you lose hope. And so I don't remember if I was talking about it with one of my members, but there is a movie which is called The Exorcist Believer, which is the sort of a sequel from the Exorcist movie, and it's been released last year. It's a horror movie and it's a very strong horror movie, so I don't recommend it to everyone. If you have watched The Exorcist, this one would probably be, you can watch the sequel as well. But there is, and I'm going to give you a spoiler alert, so if you haven't watched it and you want to watch it, please skip ahead because I'm going to say something about the ending. So at the end, there is an ex-nun which was participating in the exorcism, and she says, literally, the devil is not, well, not literally, I'm not quoting, but the sentence is more or less like this, that the devil is not there to scare us, the devil is there to make us lose hope. So that is perfect to identify the devil in the tarot meaning of the card as well. And I love that this card is really giving you that exact same vibe. So the fact that understanding that, yes, fear is there, of course, but it's all about believing that you're not enough. You're not enough. And so putting you in the situation in which you give up on things and you give up on hope. And that is exactly where you find yourself in the journey through the major arcanas when you reach the devil card. And that's why after the devil card, there has to be that sense of strong catastrophe that comes your way because we have the tower. And so when you believe that you're not enough, sequentially in your journey, when you give up hope, then the tower happens. So I really, really love this card. I know that a lot of people I heard saying that they don't like it, that it's got all of these sentences because they do prefer to have their own interpretation of the card. So it's almost as if this card with the sentences were guiding the reader a bit too much. But I have so many decks that if I want a deck that gives me the possibility to just make up my own mind about a card, I can use a different one. I just love this one, so it had to be my pick for the devil card. So for the tower card, I really felt like I wanted to pick one deck, but I looked at it, I thought about it, and then out of the blue, I was putting it back because I wasn't convinced. And this just happened to be stored right next to it. And I looked at it and I thought, no, this is a tower card deck. So it's the Joker Tarot. Hear me out. So this is a Kickstarter campaign from last year from Los Carabel. I have no idea whether they will reprint this deck and perhaps, mass market. I hope they will because it's a fantastic deck. But the reason why I felt immediately like it really clicked with the meaning of the tower is because the whole sense of this deck is about understanding that we live among the insane. So I'm not the one saying this. This is literally the concept of the deck, and it's also very well documented in the companion book, which is not, by the way, not a guidebook. It doesn't does talk about the cards, but it does not talk about the meaning of the cards. If you were expecting a companion book like a Llewellyn companion book, that is not what it is. That is almost as if it were a coffee table book. And it does refer a lot to philosophy, Eastern philosophy, Western philosophy, the concept, but also ancient Greek philosophy and the concept of Plato. There's so much that can be acknowledged out of that book. It's absolutely, it's almost as if it were a study book. Let's put it this way. It's a really great book. I love it. And so by studying that book and understanding the concept that we live in deception, our society is deceptive, it's a society of people that don't understand that we live behind a veil and we look through this veil. And so when we look at it that way, we feel like we're surrounded by insane people. So ironically, we're surrounded by fools. Please understand there's absolutely no judgment. It's not referred to actual mental health issues. This is literally a term that is used in a metaphorical way. So we are surrounded by fools. And ironically, what happens is that the only sane person, when we look at it that way, must be the fool. Because it's the only one that actually has the courage and also the insanity, ironically, to break the rules and to just jump off a cliff, to take the leap of faith in whatever it is that they're doing without even having any kind of information or even a safety net to fall into. And so the only sane person amongst the fools is the fool himself or themselves. I really believe that that is the concept of the Tower card, because there is this sense of just throwing away or letting collapse everything that doesn't make sense anymore. And the only thing that stands out of this catastrophe, out of this apocalyptic event, is what's pristine. But it's a pristine that is not like the rest. So if we need to swipe away all humanity, the only person remaining will be the one that doesn't fit in with humanity. And so that will be the fool. And that is the concept of the Tower card for me. So I really love this deck. As I said, I really hope that they'll produce it mass market, because I've heard there's a lot of people that really like it, and it's not very easy to come by. Even if you look at for it in a Facebook group, it doesn't really come up that often. And so I really, really appreciate this deck. And this is the Joker Tower, and it's my pick for the Tower card. So you'll probably know, if you watch my channel, you know one of my favorite cards in a tarot deck is the Star card, not just because it's obviously referring to my zodiac sign, which is Aquarius, but it's also because I strongly believe in hope. Hope is very healing for me. It's always been a healing kind of feeling. And so I really always look at the Star card in every deck if I can, if it's available, when I want to decide whether I want to acquire the deck or not. And I also know off the top of my head some of my favorite Star cards. Obviously, the Slow Tarot is probably one of my top 3 Star cards of all time. It needs to have that sense of hope, but at the same time, it needs to have that sense of healing. And so referring to hope and healing, when represented by an entire deck, I had to go with this deck, which is the Modern Seer Tarot by Christine McGraw. Now, this deck is unfortunately also out of print. It was a Kickstarter campaign from a few years ago. I don't believe it has ever been reprinted, which is very unfortunate because it's a fantastic deck. It's a minimalist deck, as you can see. Obviously, it's almost as if all of the drawings were made with one continuous line, but it is incredibly expressive, even though it's minimalist. And I absolutely love this. And I believe that it takes a lot of skills in order to be able to convey the sense of a card, even when using 1 or 2 lines, as you can see here. I really, really appreciate this deck, but this deck is a star deck for me, or a star card deck for me, because it is very healing. By being minimalist, but at the same time conveying the sense of the feeling in the cards, is actually allowing me to probably give myself a break and probably understand that I don't always have to be perfect, but even more so, I can actually allow myself to make mistakes. It feels like it's very nurturing, and at the same time, it's giving me a lot of positive energy. I absolutely love to use this deck for definitely for healing readings, and I pair it up with an oracle deck. And you know what? I know that we're only talking about tarot decks today, but I can't resist showing you how well this deck work with this oracle. So this oracle here is the Vessel Oracle. It's by the Spirit Speak collective. I really love it. I know that there's a few really strong cards in this deck, but what happens is that when you pair up a very strong and powerful deck with a very nurturing or healing tarot, the result is actually it's probably conducive of that sense of compassion that I really seek. And so these two, it's probably because they have similarities when it comes to the art style. The Vessel Oracle also is quite minimalist because of the lines, as you can see. But it's just that every single one of these cards has a very strong, powerful sense of kindness that comes out of the cards. And I really love pairing these two together. Every time, I use it mostly for myself, as I said, in my healing practice. Sometimes, if I'm requested to use the Modern Seers as a deck, I reach out to the person and I want to make sure that they understand that it's a very minimalist deck. And sometimes people don't like that. I understand that because we want to see symbols in the cards, even though, of course, there are symbols in order for us to understand what minors we're talking about or what major we're talking about. But at the same time, the fact that it's so minimalistic gives you, it's almost as if it will be pairing the blow of the message in the card when the message is very powerful, and paired up with the oracle deck is just fantastic. So the defeat between the Ace of Cups and the Page of Swords, for example, look at how strong this message is, and yet it's still kind of softened by the fact that the tarot cards on the sides are kind of minimalist. I really, really love these two together, but in any case, the Modern Seer is definitely my pick for the Star card. And my pick for the Moon card had to be the Blood Moon Tarot. And I'm not cheating by choosing this deck because I know that it's got the word moon on the title, but this deck is all about the moon, and it's all about that sense of ebb and flow in life, but it's also bringing us back to some kind of trance state of mind, that oniric related to sleep, because it's almost as if it were transporting us into a realm of fantasy, but it's got a bit of a darkness to it as well. And so I always compare it with the Pan's Labyrinth by Guillermo del Toro, which is a fantastic movie. If you haven't watched it, I highly recommend it. And it's not just because there's actually a couple of characters in here that look precisely like the characters from the movie, but it's literally because we have this sense of darkness that is in the cards, and it comes, even a beautiful and a positive card like the World card, and yet it does have a lot of darkness in it, and I absolutely adore it. It feels like it's one of those decks that really transports you away from yourself, almost as if you were tapping into your own intuition thanks to the light of the moon, which is not a sparkling light, it's not the sun light, it's not something that will give us a precise and sterile and still idea of the things that surround us, but it kind of plays with the chiaroscuro, with the light and shadow. And this deck is all like the whole deck is like that. I really love it. It's one of my favorite decks. Again, I know that I keep on saying this today, but I am, picking the decks that I really, really love, obviously, for these prompts. And this is definitely a moon vibe to me. It couldn't be otherwise. I honestly looked at the other decks and there were a few contestants, but this is literally what the moon energy feels like to me. and I love using it, but I mostly use it for that kind of those kind of readings. So readings that refer back to the oniric state of dreaming, accessing a reality that is not of this world, that contains a message that we might want actually to dive deep into, but we also need to find our way back up. So absolutely love this deck. It's a Blood Moon Tower. It's my choice for the Moon card. So we have come to the last three cards in the major. So the last three decks that I'm going to show you. And now for the Sun, I've actually got this really gorgeous deck, which is called the Desert Illuminations Tarot by Lindsay D. Williams. This is the first edition. I'm so very proud that I've got this edition because it is my favorite. There has been a second edition without borders. And I believe the color palette was slightly different as well. And I believe, if I'm not wrong, Lindsay was actually announcing on her Instagram page that she's been picked up. This deck has been picked up mass market. And so we might see it, probably US Games, because they're doing an excellent job in picking up on indie decks that are very popular and then printing them. I love how sunny this deck is. It's not just because of the colors, but it's also because of the sense of almost surreal presence of aliens in New Mexico. So this deck is based on the culture of New Mexico. I have been there, and I absolutely love New Mexico. I can attest that there's so much of these vibes in the various places. I just really, really appreciate how sunny this deck is. It's just that sense of being cheeky, but at the same time smiling. So it's not the being cheeky of the Bohemian Gothic Tarot that is the one that is really inviting you to make a choice. This deck is not presenting you with a choice. It's just really sunny. It just tells you life is beautiful. Even, there's aliens and there's death sometimes. And, you have to go through some things. And there's spears like that, or daggers, I believe they're called. But there's also chili. And so, everything is happy. Everything is fine. And it just really, I just love the cards. I love everything about them. And I'm really curious to know which, publisher will pick it up. But also I'm curious to know what they will choose as a cardstock. It will be very interesting to see what changes they will apply to the cards as well. So this is the Dazzle Illumination Star, and it's my pick for the Sun card. So we've come to the Judgment card, and as I was talking about the Justice card before, and so making a distinction between how to read the Justice card and the Judgment card, and how Rachel Pollack expresses the difference mainly by saying that in the Justice card you have to deal with the consequences of your being part of a society. And in the Judgment card instead, you're called to also have to deal with the consequences of what you've done in society, but on a more as above kind of level. So to me, that will mean in a spiritual sense. And so I was looking at my collection and I had to go with this one. This is the Spiritual Tarot. This is a deck by Los Carabel. I believe it's been printed or released last year. I don't see this deck very often, which is weird because I believe, there's a niche of tarot readers that use tarot for yoga, for example, and for meditation and spiritual connections. And I believe that this deck would be fantastic. I don't know, but perhaps I haven't seen it because I haven't actually looked for it. But if you Google it, you probably find videos about this. I love this deck. It is the main energy of this deck is the spiritual energy, and it really brings you back to that concept of the Judgment card. So every single one of these cards they just don't feel very so below. There are different interpretations to the card as well, and in this case I highly recommend going back to the guidebook in this case, because it does explain the different takes on a few cards, especially in the Suit of Swords. I have to say, I appreciate them. I don't necessarily agree with them, but it's fine because, we can actually appreciate and like a different perspective on a card without necessarily making it our own. But I feel like this deck has got so much of these as above energy. Even this Six of Cups, there's a story behind it. The Ten of Swords, is actually really beautiful. So I really, really like this deck, and I like the way in which it really puts you in that kind of mood in which you're connected to the vibes of the as above, to the spiritual vibes. And I appreciate it for that. So it's definitely my pick for the Judgment card, because I really believe that it's expressing those kind of energies. So we've come to the last card, and it's a World card. And to be honest with you, it took me a while to pick a deck, because I didn't really know. I know the meaning of the World card, but I didn't really know which deck would represent that energy. So it's the energy of having completing something, but knowing that that's not the end. The end is never the end. And I just didn't have any deck that, at least when I was looking at them, that gave me that kind of vibe. And so I'm actually asking for recommendations, because if you have a deck that really speaks about the continuity of life and the cycle of life, then let me know in the comments below. There could be a deck that is actually called the Cycle of Life or something like that. I don't have it. But then, I was scanning all of the decks in the shelves, and my eyes just fell onto this deck, and I thought to myself, if there is a deck that makes me want to keep on moving, so that not just gives me the idea that there is a completion, that when it comes to an end, it needs to start because movement is life, but also that gives me that kind of energy and puts me in that kind of space, is the Curious Travels Tarot deck by Arozera. So this one was until a couple of days ago, perhaps last week, it was still on sale. The India edition was still for sale on the creator's website. And I don't know, because there were news about this deck being picked up mass market, but I don't necessarily know what's come to that, because it has been, it was rumors from a couple of years ago. And so sometimes it takes long, but sometimes there are problems. I have no idea. But in any case, it probably still is available as an indie edition. And if not, I think that there was some kind of a confirmation that it will be picked up mass market. I feel like this deck really invites me to keep on going. It just tells me that we need to enjoy when a cycle comes to an end, and we need to celebrate, because I, for one, as someone who's always saying you need to celebrate the little things, because when you do celebrate the little things, the little victories, you create a good memory, and that good memory will be very helpful when you find yourself in a moment of trouble, in a moment of sadness, and you will gather the energy out of that good memory, and you will remind yourself that everything goes, everything passes. So there's life is a continuous cycle. And if now you're down, you will be going back up soon. And it can't rain all the time. And I know that I'm saying all these cliche, but they are very powerful sentences and messages, and I really believe in them. And so this is one of the decks that tells me, enjoy the little things, enjoy the small trouble, enjoy the stroll in the park, enjoy whatever you can do, because then you will need it. You will need that kind of energy when you won't be able to do a stroll in the park. But it keeps on moving. It's something that it really talks about the continuity and the movement that it is life itself. And so I was kind of happy when at the beginning, I don't know what I was focusing on, but when I saw it, then I knew that this deck would have been a good pick for the World card, at least for me, because I do look at this deck in the same way as I look at the World card. So that was it. We had 22 tarot decks and an oracle deck. And if you're still here with me, you're a trooper. Thank you so much. It was a fantastic, fantastic video. I loved picking the decks. And thank you so much, Marine, for creating this deck, because it was really so much fun. But for now, have a great day.